Take it, Benny. I said, take it, Benny. Miles, you too. Hey, Miles.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
Evening, everybody. Yeah. Miles. Good evening, one and all. Thanks, Debbie. It was a fun mini today, yeah. Hey, Martin. Miles, you're gonna fall right off of that thing. Hey, Mackenzie. Hey, Marcia. Hey, Lisa.
Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet and the even more torrid band who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable.
Hey, Octavio.
In the urban room of the Congress Hotel.
Oh, thanks,
in
Jenny.
Chicago. And first of all,
Glad to hear that. Welcome along to this one.
Hits, Blue Skies.
I was just actually at the Nederlander Theater, the old set of the Iroquois, last night to see Six with the school group. Hey, Timothy. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Maureen. Hey, Todd. Jill. Diane. Hey, Jean. Purr, this guy. Hey, Noreen. Hey, Georgia. Hey, Frank. Hey, Joseph, watching over on Twitter. Hey, Evelyn. Hey, Megan. Go be with your fans of dead people, says Megan's mom. Okay. Hey, Mona. Heather. Hey, Caesar over in Poland. Even Kathleen in the whole euphonium section. Hey, Gene in the thunder showers all day long. So everybody, I went to the Museum of Illusions today. A lot of it was, stuff you see on placemats or novelty shops and stuff, but on a larger scale. By the end of it, I had vertigo that lasted over an hour. Did not enjoy that myself. Fun selfie spots and all. But I'm kind of still thinking every line I see on the sidewalk is going to turn into a picture. Hey, Betsy. Hey, Eileen. It's full of stuff to make you feel stupid and stuff to make you feel dizzy. So pick your poison. Hey, Eileen. Yeah, Debbie, Taylor Street on Saturday. Walking tour on Taylor. Hey, Ben. Let's see, have I decided where I'm going for... Yeah, I think I know where I'm going tomorrow for Find a Grave. Be a very special episode of Find a Grave Friday. Cemetery I don't use too often. It's a little further away. Did Priya just sneak in? Yeah, Priya's back there. You can see Priya back there a little bit there. Hey, Bridget and Joanne. Mary Jo. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Lorena. I don't get vertigo enough that I have to worry about, that I'm worried about it or anything. Hey, Todd. Hey, Heidi. Hey, a bat, excellent icon there. Hey, Dad. A Satilla Colada. Or Satya Colada. Hey, Jeff. Fewer than 1 million people in Houston without power now. That's a move. Hey, Leah. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Elaine. Miles. Putting his hand on my shoulder over like, hey, you're supposed to be patting me when I'm up here like this. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, Gene. Hey, you all in sundry. Hey, Adam.
Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Oh, I've only seen the clips from the press runs for tonight, but they were excellent. Hey, Cindy. Debbie, I never want to commit to meals or events after a tour. It always kind of depends on how I'm feeling. Sometimes tours can really wipe me out. I mean, I went to the lunch last time, but I was only feeling about half coherent. Hey, Katie. Hey, Bob. I want to leave everything there on the street. Hey, Mom. Hey, everybody. Welcome along. Hey, Katie. Hey. I know I'll see some of you on Saturday, day after tomorrow, for Dark History on Taylor. Still plenty of space on there, though. Thank you, Susan. I got a button all the way up, too. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Wendy. Hey, Grandma Belle. Did you just walk away? I think she just left. While and wherefore you're all I'll ever care for. I think I'm just about done on the new Mysterious Chicago merch that you'll be able to get soon in limited supply. Telling of the miracle the day you came along. And every night I'll tell the stars above you to say how can I love you with all of my heart. Man, I haven't even checked the weather reports for Saturday. I work rain or shine, so it costs me a lot of money when it rains. Look at this cat here. Cats under the stars. Evening, everybody. Welcome along. We're just getting ready over here. I'm gonna go close this window over here. Still got a couple Benny tunes to do before we start. Hey, Emily. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Bob. No, I'm fully buttoned up right now. I'm not going for the Bob Dylan look tonight. Hey, Robert. Good to see you, Timothy. Miles. Hey, Scott. Robert and Georgia. Hey, everybody. Welcome along. We'll get started here shortly. Look at this guy. You're about to be on some merch, you know, or a cartoon of you anyway. Evening, Sarah. Hey, Gina. Always good to have Gina here. Hey, Jen. I'm gonna go close this window. Enjoy some Miles time for a second. We're gonna let Benny do one more tune. Any juicy information at the research center? A little bit. Join the Patreon to find out. Hey, Debbie, yeah, it's a little bit chilly out tonight.
And they all loved it. They all loved those Fastons when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same
Miles.
vein, Rosetta.
Evening, Beth. We're going to let Benny Goodman do one more tune, then we will get started properly. Hey, Joyce. Evening, everybody. Glad to have you, Lori. Well, Lynn. Wellity. Miles is just being extra attentive tonight. Hey, Tom. Oh, and you know what I got is I got a good version of a Minnie Wallace picture. Another serial killer that has not been around too much. Show you a quick flash of it. Now, it's like there's a version of this that I've seen on the internet, but it's not very good. Here's a full shot of her in her 40s. And look at this. She looks like she's about to start doing the Thriller dance. Hey, Joyce. Joyce, tonight we are doing The Victims of H.H. Holmes, a variation on my H.H. Holmes tour. Miles. Hey, Gene at G-Fest. I'm telling you, it was. I don't want to post it for too long, but it'll be up. We'll use it on something one of these days. Definitely gathering some more stuff about Minnie and some more stuff about some of our other early old-timey serial killers. We got some podcasting coming up. Marie, no. The rules about drinking whenever I mention H.H. Holmes are suspended when it's an H.H. Holmes-focused tour. I'm not trying to kill anybody here. All right. That is Benny wrapping up.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago.
Evening, Karen.
And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
All right. So, it looks like Miles is just going to be sticking around up here tonight, but it is time that we got started properly. All right, everybody, welcome along to Mysterious Chicago. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now, author of such books as Ghosts of Chicago, now in a 10th anniversary edition, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. We have got Murder Maps USA, new from Thames and Hudson Press, and we have got H.H. Holmes, of course, The True History of the White City Devil, the subject of tonight's evening tour. I also appeared on about half of the episodes of a show about Holmes called American Ripper. I've been a talking head on any number of H.H. Holmes shows over the years. Really, modesty aside, if they want to do the Holmes story right, they have me as a talking head. If they just want to repeat all of the myths and legends, I don't hear from them back after I send them my notes on the talking points. So we will do a little bit of some H.H. Holmes 101 stuff. So here we have the Aldi on 63rd Street, across the street from the post office at 63rd and Wallace. Now, on the site where this now stands, or at least part of it, most of it would have been over in the grassy knoll to the left, but this was the site of a building that came to be known as the Murder Castle, or more commonly in its time, the Holmes Castle. Well, when Holmes was actually occupying this building, nobody really called it anything. He was just like the Englewood property or the Wallace Street property, but eventually it came to be known as the Holmes Castle. March 1893, the Chicago Tribune published this article, Hid in Secret Rooms Where Dealers Discover Their Missing Furniture. This guy H.H. Holmes had a building that he had added a third floor onto under the pretense of starting a hotel for the upcoming World's Fair. It was never quite completed and never quite open for business or anything. But he said that he was going to be turning this into a hotel. Really, it was all a blind for swindles. He would buy stuff from everybody who might be furnishing hotels, furniture suppliers, hardware suppliers, drapery suppliers. He would buy all of this stuff from them on credit, and they were all being very free with credit with the World's Fair coming to town, and then he would sell it for cash. And until he could sell it for cash, he would hide it in hidden rooms all over the building. So after a while, he set fire to the building and had to go on the run from the insurance companies because they knew exactly what had happened. About a year after the fair ended, he was out traveling around. He'd been in jail briefly in St. Louis. He'd gotten in some trouble in Texas. Then in Philadelphia, he faked his friend's death, or at least claimed he was faking his friend's death. Really, he just killed his friend and claimed the insurance money. So after the police caught up with him on this and the Pinkerton detectives, he was arrested really just as a swindler, a guy who had faked his friend's death for the insurance money. And at this point, people remembered, hey, didn't this guy have a building back in Chicago that was supposed to be full of hidden rooms and secret passages? Shouldn't we investigate this? And then they decided, nah, kind of forgot all about him for 6 months. But then after a couple of victims of his were found in Toronto, they started digging up every part of this place. And stories spread and spread and spread that it was full of torture equipment and everything you could possibly need to kill a person. A lot of this really just came from the police poking around thinking, we found a rope, he must have been hanging people, or we found a sharp object. You could kill somebody with a sharp object, or oh, look, a blunt instrument. All the stuff that you would find around any building. It's kind of sobering to think that you could make a murder castle from the things you find at home. But eventually, by the time things were dying down and everybody had just given up on the story in Chicago, as they never really found anything they could pin on him. Now, we've also got this article that came out of the New York World, a really fascinating newspaper published by Old Man Pulitzer out in New York. Now, they put an article in one of their Sunday magazine pullouts. Now, even in the most respectable pullouts, most respectable newspapers, the Sunday pullouts were like the Weekly World News. So this one had the Castle of a Modern Bluebeard, which had a diagram with rooms labeled the Room of the Three Corpses, the Black Closet, the Maze, the Dummy Elevator for Lowering Bodies. Some of this was based on stuff that actually had been reported. Some came out of their own imagination. Also, they were the ones who suggested, wasn't this a hotel? Was he advertising for people to come work in the hotel? Look at the list of all the people who went to Chicago and never returned. Could they have all been at this hotel? This really solidified what we now have as the legend of H.H. Holmes. The term murder castle came about in the 1930s. And really, that's the legend of H.H. Holmes. Now, eventually he wrote a confession in which he confessed to having killed 27 people. In the 1940s, somebody suggested that maybe it was as many as 200. That tends to be the starting point for people now. Around Halloween, it can go up into the thousands. But that we know of, more or less for sure, there are really only 9 murders that we can attribute to him, which is still quite a lot of murders. Among the 27, there were some who weren't even dead yet. So what we're going to be doing today is to talk on the victims of H.H. Holmes. We've traced his whole career on these things quite a few times. This one's a little bit different, and we're going to talk a bit more about what we know about the victims. We're going to make this be their show this time. So, right across the street from the grassy knoll, as we mentioned before, there is this Aldi. This was the first place where Holmes worked in Chicago. He came to town in 1886. The place was owned by a woman named Dr. Holton. Now, the way that they always portray this now, ever since about 1940, is they always say that poor old Mrs. Holton was trying to run the place herself, but her husband, the doctor, was dying of cancer upstairs. So she was only too happy to hire this energetic young go-getter named Holmes. Now, it took me a while to figure this one out. It turns out Dr. Holton was not an old man. Dr. Holton was a young woman. This old man and a woman are just people filling in the blanks based on very vague newspaper articles. This is a reasonable guess based on what you can find in a couple of papers. If you go and dig through more of them, you can find a lot more. Well, at least it'll tell you that the name was Dr. E.S. Holton. It took me a while. I had to find the National Medical Directory that explained to me that E.S. stood for Elizabeth Sarah. And that led to more. Dr. E.S. Holton was not an old woman. She was a young woman. It was not a doctor's wife. She was a doctor. Now, she had been at the University of Michigan about a year before H.H. Holmes himself was there in medical school. I think she was better at medical school than he was. Most people were. Now, right around the time that Holmes bought the place, she had become pregnant again and apparently decided to get out of the business. So she had another baby, was never really heard from again. Holmes bought the place from her more or less fair and square. There are a lot of newspaper references saying that they had really beat it out of him, or at some point, in some cases, they literally say they had to hold a gun to his head to get him to pay up for buying the place. But he did. There's no lawsuit on file or anything. So he did buy this place. They never really talked to the press. Their daughter, the Holton's daughter, had died in early 1895, so she might have been off in mourning someplace around the time of the Great Castle investigation. So she was not available to talk. Never commented on Holmes herself, as far as I have ever been able to find out. But you never know what might be digitized that wasn't in the microfilm room around over here. So it is generally said that Dr. and Mrs. Holton disappeared. But the real truth is they are down here at Oakwood Cemetery. Right across from the Jewish section where we used to do cleanups. They're now actually cleaning that up themselves. But there they are. Holmes can at least be off the hook for these ones. Abby, their daughter, died in 1895. Her life at least overlapped with Holmes, but he was already in jail by the time of her death. So here I am. This was a kind of a big research moment for me. This had never been really dug into before. So, Kristen, duly noted. I'm going to kind of wait till the weather cools down just a little bit, I think. Or maybe we should do it, like, around the time of the convention. All right. Didn't mean to have that sitting up here right now. So, going back a little bit further, Holmes had been in medical school, then he had operated around upstate New York for a while, and married a woman by the name of Myrta Holmes. He was already married to a woman back in New Hampshire where he grew up, but that's neither here nor there. So he was married to at least a couple of women that we knew of. Eventually he would add a third wife and various girlfriends as well. One of the people he confessed to killing that we don't really have enough data one way or the other is there was a person from his class at the University of Michigan named Robert Leacock. In Holmes' various confessions, he said that he killed him for the insurance money. Leacock did in fact die in approximately the right time period, but I've never found anything suggesting how he died or any real data about it. There's really nothing to back that it might have been him. The first victim that we can say with any degree of certainty happened shortly after Holmes, a couple of years after Holmes bought the land across the street from that drugstore on 63rd and put up the two-story version of the building that we now call the Castle. Now into that moved Julia Connor, who came to town with her husband, Ned Connor, pictured here in much smaller. Slightly larger shot of him. Now, this is a joke that I tell occasionally, is that when I was putting these books together, I tried to find a picture of everybody. Photographs are not going to happen with a lot of these people. It's a few years too early to be able to regularly find people from a news story photographed, but drawings of photographs still tend to survive. Now, I went over backwards to find some of them, and some of them I just couldn't find a thing, and I'd finally tell myself, you know what, it's just going to be a white guy with a mustache. So it's pretty much always a white guy with a mustache. So just recently, though, since the book came out, I did find there is a photograph of Ned Connors going around now. And this came up on an Ancestry.com page for him. It matches everything that I've got on him. I've got no reason to think that this isn't him. It's a little bit scratched, but there we have it. So that's one of the biggest finds that I've had. There haven't been that many finds since the book, shameless plug, came out back in 2017. So, this was Julia. We've actually got some of her paperwork on file. Now, I think it was Julia's idea to move to the big city. She and Ned moved to town from some little town in Iowa. Eventually, Ned moved back and lived in other little towns around Iowa. But Her paperwork appears all over the place. Holmes eventually loaned her some money to become a part owner of the drugstore. He hired her as a bookkeeper, but in addition to that, he was also having an affair with her, which Ned knew all about. And eventually, after one big fight, they decided, okay, we'll stay married until this date, then you go your way, I'll go mine. Ned moved out of the castle building, got a job in some other jewelry store, and Julia stayed behind and continued carrying on an affair with Holmes. We only know little bits of details of this. We know that one time when Holmes was talking to Ned, he mentioned something about Julia that he wouldn't have known unless he had known her intimately. We can only use our imagination as to what that was. That's just what Ned told the police. She seems to have been the one who wanted to go to the big city. She wanted to work for herself. She wanted to make her own money. She came along with her daughter Pearl, who was 4 at the time that they moved in. We know really nothing about what Pearl was like as a person, other than Cora Quinlan, the janitor's daughter, who played with her occasionally, said that Pearl was ever so nice and I liked her very much. That's really about all that we've got on what sort of person Pearl was. But she was that we get that from the daughter of Pat Quinlan, who was the janitor at the place. But Julia and Pearl were supposed to go to Davenport, Iowa for Christmas in 1891. Julia's sister was getting married. But then they never showed up. Dun dun dun. So Davenport papers started to speculate about this after Holmes' crimes came to light, but people in Julia's life, of course, had been wondering where they were for quite a while. Well, one time Holmes even went up to Ned and said, "Hey, do you know where Julia and Pearl are?" And Ned said, "Yes, I know just where they are." And Holmes kind of backed up, thinking, "Really? You know where they are, do you?" And then eventually Ned relented and admitted that no, he didn't know where they were, and Holmes calmed down quite a bit. Now, when they were digging up the castle building 4 years later, they did find a couple of skeletons down in the basement that appeared to be the bones of a woman and a young girl, which would match things up just about exactly. Now, Holmes had a whole story for this ready to go. He said when they found these bones that appeared to be human, they found a lot of bones in the basement, most of them turned out not to be human, but he gave them this whole long story, saying that years ago when he was first getting involved in insurance fraud, he and his buddies had hatched a plot where he went to Chicago and found a couple of dead bodies that he then took, after buying them from a medical school, nice and legally, he took to McCoy's European Hotel, which was right over here by where the Board of Trade is now. And he said that in this hotel, he loaded the bodies up into a barrel, but then they chickened out about turning them in for insurance money and instead put them over in a nearby Fidelity storage warehouse. And then when he bought his own building, he said he had them buried down in the basement. Now, nobody actually believed this, but it seems awfully convenient to me that Holmes, even through his horribly incompetent lawyer, would have had a story like this ready to go for when bodies were found in the basement if none of them were human. So I think there's a very good chance that what they had found was the bodies of Julia and Pearl Connor. Now, through his various confessions that Holmes would make later on, and he actually made several confessions over time, one thing he was fairly consistent on was saying that Julia had died from the effects of an abortion. Now, it may or may not have administered it himself. He was by no means that good of a doctor, but it was a very dangerous procedure in those days. And that was one thing he was fairly consistent on. One thing he never said is what happened to Pearl. Based on how he normally worked, my guess is he probably killed her with cyanide. For no other reason than it was just the easiest way to get her to handle the situation. But welcome along, everybody just joining me here. So, they had been living at the castle building. After they disappeared in Christmas of 1891, Holmes would also write some letters to Julia's father saying, "Hey, Julia has left my employ, but I need her signature on some paperwork. Do you know where she is?" And eventually people put the pieces together. Those were most likely their bones that were found in the basement, but it's one of those things that forensics just weren't quite there yet. From there came a woman into town by the name of Emmeline Segrand. And we're going to look down Madison Street here a little ways here now. You see the site with all of those windows down right below me right now. That is the site of the old McVickers Theater building. Now, we do know that a woman named Emmeline Segrand, who took up a job in the castle building and was having an affair with somebody who was almost certainly Holmes, one day went to visit a friend over at the McVickers building and told her all about her new fiance, Mr. Belknap. That was Holmes's wife's maiden name. She told a lot of people she was engaged, but she told everybody that the person had a different name. Really, I think that she was a young woman with a secret. She knew that Holmes was married. Her impression was this Murda woman was sick and going to die soon, and then she'd marry Holmes. They'd live in a big house on Honore Street. But it was a young woman named Emmeline Segrand. Now, this is one woman we do not have a photograph of that we can confirm. However, I point out the McVickers thing because when I was working on one of those TV shows, they had like a box of stuff, including some Holmes documents, and then a whole bunch of photographs, most of which were unlabeled or incorrectly. There was one that they said was Patrick Quinlan, the janitor. Turned out to be another guy of the same name. But there was this one photo in the pile that does to me kind of look like Emmeline Segrand and was taken in a photographer's building in a photographer's studio that was in the McVickers building. So this is a possible photograph of Emmeline Segrand. There's just not enough to go by to know for sure. But there were a number, and I think she did have a number of photographs taken at the time. She was a very dramatic young woman, and I would imagine possibly liked getting her photograph taken. Now, she would even write little bits of poems at the end of her letters, like lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and in passing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. That's a lot to write out by hand. It's kind of an obnoxiously long signature, even if you copy and paste. But she had been working at the Keeley Institute down in Dwight. The Keeley Company was a cure for alcoholism. It's kind of notable in being a place that it didn't treat alcoholism as a character weakness. It treated it really as a disease. I don't know how effective the treatments were, but it was kind of ahead of its time in that way. Emmeline had come from Lafayette, Indiana, and got a job in Dwight at the Keeley Institute. One story is she got fired for being just too much of a dreamer. But at some point, she came up to Chicago. One story was that she was having an affair with Benjamin Peitzel, who was later a Holmes victim himself. He had suffered from alcoholism and made some offhand comment to suggest that he might have been at the Keeley Institute at one point. But we don't really know for sure. It just seems more likely to me that the affair would have been with Holmes himself. Here's a copy of one of the letters. Her signature is typewritten. At the bottom of the letter, she adds, Now, this was a letter that she wrote to her cousin, Dr. Benjamin Segrand, who was a dentist. And the dentist, he also figures into the Adolf Lutgert sausage factory murder. When they found a couple of teeth in the cleaning vat, some people said it was Louise's teeth, the victim. Other people accused them of the prosecution of just going to Dr. B.J. Segrand, whose office was nearby, and getting the teeth from him. He is also a noted supporter of Flag Day. He is in fact considered the father of Flag Day and very interested in flags. I sometimes call him the Forrest Gump of crime and patriotism. Now, Emmeline disappeared in December of 1892. Holmes told everybody, he even published a marriage announcement saying that she had gone off to marry a guy by the name of Robert Phelps. Nobody has ever been able to find Robert Phelps existing anywhere. But he told everybody that she had gone off to Europe, and people kind of stopped wondering and looking for her. But at the time of his confession, Holmes had changed his story a little bit and said that no, actually, I did kind of marry her. It just wasn't a real marriage. It was kind of a sham marriage. And then when she got pregnant, and I convinced her to have an abortion, and she died. Later on, he had been saying that she had gone off to live in a nunnery someplace. But eventually, on the last night of his life, Holmes wrote out this note, or close to the last night of his life. This was a letter to the Segrands, to her sister Philomena, saying, Emmeline Segrand, I very much regret to say, is dead. I will shortly have forwarded to the public a full account and see of Very difficult to read, but very truly yours, H.H. Holmes. Now, he did write a letter to the family. The full contents of the letter don't survive. They were delivered by a guy who worked with a collection agency in Chicago and was meeting with Holmes regularly in jail. It was delivered to Chief Badenoch in Chicago, a guy who couldn't catch a cold, and he just kind of summarized it as nothing we didn't already know. It has not survived that I know of, but my impression is that he said in it that she died from the effects of an abortion. He may or may not have done himself. But it's really remarkably late how long that story took to break. They had been investigating the place for quite a while before stories about this woman, Emmeline Cigrand, started to circulate. People who lived in the building started saying, well, I've said 100 times there was something wrong in the disappearance of Emmeline Cigrand. But it took a long time for them to start saying anything about it, at least anywhere when anybody would hear it. Also, if you poke around on Google Books, you can find Dr. Cigrand's book, The Rise and Fall of Revival of Dental Prosthesis, an introductory lecture by B.J. Cigrand. It's a page-turner. It really is. Now, he had met with Emmeline. He was big into genealogy. She was a cousin that he hadn't met. I really think that he must have gotten a picture of her or something. But one of them is not surfaced for sure. But he is a first-hand witness to the murder castle. He did walk around the building and commented about how cheaply it had been built. He thought the place could fall apart at any second. So that brings us to December of 1892, the time at which Emmeline disappeared. Right around that time, moved to Chicago, a woman named Minnie Williams, who lived just above Lincoln Park at first, in a place on this street. Just above the park. It's a fantastic street. It looks like it hasn't changed a bit. But of all of the different Holmes victims, she's really kind of the most puzzling. Even one of the newspaper articles about her way back when was titled, She Dealt in Mystery. Minnie Williams, born in Texas, orphaned at a very young age. She was sent off to live with guardians while her sister Nanny was sent off to live with an aunt over in Louisiana. Now, they kind of forgot that the other existed. Eventually, Minnie was raised by a series of guardians around Texas, and then they were introduced at the home of a mutual friend when they were about grown. But Minnie had dreams of becoming an actress, and to that end, using the money she had inherited, moved to Boston, where she studied at the conservatory. There's a program from there that gives us really our only data about what her middle name was. It's signed Minnie R. Williams all over. Sometimes she appears as M.R. Williams, but this gives us the middle name Rayford. Minnie Rayford Williams. Elsewhere in the program is a picture of a woman doing a tableau scene. And this looks very much like Minnie to me, but there's, her face isn't really up. It's hard to tell for sure. But there are a few drawings of pictures. Not too many pictures have really survived for sure, but there are a few that kind of look like her. There was a drawing of her when she was younger. That's probably based on a photograph. There's this other drawing of her that looks very much like an actress portrait. There was also some stuff. There were some stories about finding that chain that she's wearing in the furnace. And I actually did find her signature in the legal archives. That was a very neat thing to see. But the fact that this is stamped by the H.S. Campbell and Yates Company shows that she definitely seems to have known more about what was going on in the building. She got a job working for Holmes as kind of a secretary and office person. Some people said, one person described her as being a woman who didn't act like she worked there, but she worked there. Some people said that Holmes was even a little bit afraid of her. Now, people who remembered her from back in school described her as a man-hater and were very surprised that she'd ever gotten mixed up with any man, let alone H.H. Holmes. But she had gotten a job with him after her money ran out and she couldn't really afford to keep up trying to become an actress anymore. So I've always said there's a lesson here about giving up on your dreams, because the first job she got was for H.H. Holmes. Now, eventually, she and Holmes started posing at least as man and wife. They seemed to have had some kind of affair. She seemed to have had a better idea that there were swindles going on than other people did. My read on the situation is she thought she was using him to get money to restart her acting career. We don't know enough for sure. We know that they eventually got an apartment together along with Nanny, her sister, who came up to Chicago for the fair and then stuck around. over on Wrightwood Avenue in Lincoln Park. Now, exactly where this building was is difficult to say. It was 1220 Wrightwood in the old numbering. But the old numbering changed in 1909. And there's a renaming guide or renumbering guide that we can use to say that it would have been right around here. But then there are some maps. There's a diagram of the inside of the place, which is very cool to see. And maps showing where it was that don't really match where we would guess from the renumbering guide. So, very difficult to say. But she and Nanny moved in here. It was neighbors remembered that they had no idea how to do things like boil water or very basic housework or anything like that. Another neighbor overheard Holmes and Nanny talking about going on the Ferris wheel in early July of 1893. They said they were talking about having been down to the fair. That was really the last time either of them were ever seen alive. Shortly thereafter, Nanny's Aunt Lucy got a letter effectively saying, "This is great. I love my new brother-in-law, Harry Gordon," as Holmes was calling himself at the time. "We are going to go to Old Orchard Beach in Maine, then we're going to go to the St. Lawrence River, and then we're going to go to Europe so I can study art. So if you don't hear from me for a long time, don't worry about it." This all sounds very, very convenient. It seems honestly unlikely that Nanny had written this herself. My guess is that Minnie wrote it. Some people suggested it was Holmes, but I believe it was written in handwriting, not typed out. There's versions that were published closer to the source, have a couple of lines that aren't in most of the reprints of it. But shortly after this was written, the two of them just disappeared. There's also, right after that, there were a whole lot of real estate transfers where Minnie's real estate that she held out in Fort Worth, Texas, was transferred to Holmes for the price of $1. This was thought of as hints of dark deeds. Now, eventually, Holmes put a coded message into a London newspaper. Now, he was telling everybody when he was captured, "Oh, those children who are missing are all off with this woman named Minnie Williams. She's in London with them." They put this coded message into the paper, but she failed to respond. Eventually, he had a very long story about this, trying to blame everything that had happened on Minnie Williams, saying, "Well, Minnie killed her sister. I admit that Nanny's dead, but Minnie's the one who killed her. She killed her with a footstool. I helped get rid of the body, but that's it. If you find any other dead bodies, Minnie did that too. She's just trying to make it look like it was me." This fooled no one. Their lawyer, William Kappa, showed up. We'd actually have a photograph of him, but he made a complete fool of himself roaming around the city. Now, this is one thing. If I ever have some time down in Dallas-Fort Worth, more than just going there to catch a bus, I would like to check some records down there because I bet there is stuff about their estate still on file to this day. There's probably quite a lot of stuff down there that is still on file to this day. Other states, I couldn't really get into the legal archives as well. Now, here we have a bit of a question mark one. This is a place we used to call the body dump. There was a glass bending factory here that Holmes had apparently owned. Not too much is known about it. But one of the victims he was accused of having killed while he was in Chicago was a young woman named Emily Van Tassel. She usually went by Emily Van Tassel, though by some accounts her real name was Edna Darby. She disappeared around 1891. This is her mother who told the police about all of this and decided that Holmes had killed her daughter. Apparently she was working in Frank Wild's fruit and candy store on Milwaukee Avenue, near where Wicker Park is now and near where Emily Van Tassel lived, but the police were never quite sure what to make of her. The one idea was that she just really, really wanted closure. She identified a picture of Holmes and said, "No, that is not the man my daughter was working for." But then she saw one of Benjamin Peitzel and said, "Yes, that looks more like him." And this gets weirder and weirder. Now, Emily Van Tassel had disappeared in 1891. Holmes pretty steadfastly groaned whenever this one came. I said, "No, I never ran a fruit shop on Milwaukee Avenue, or anywhere else for that matter." Now, one of the really weird things, he did mention her in the confession, but there are two versions of the confession. There was the version published in Philadelphia, the version published in New York. They're just slightly different. Probably just a result of different things with the rewrite room and different things with the typesetting. But in one version, he calls her Anna Van Tassad, and the other, she's Rosine Van Jassend. And then other people called her other names. Like, no two articles about Emily Van Tassel uses quite the same name for her. So she is just puzzling from start to end. So another one that I will bring up as a possible is there are a couple of possibles, really. One of the people that Holmes mentioned in his confession was Anna Betts, who was a woman who it turns out to be a real person. He says the press have constantly said that I killed Anna Betts, or Virginia Anna Betts as her full name was. Now, there is a death certificate on file for her. We can see here she lived on 63rd Street in Englewood. She died of apoplexy, which is just a term for sudden death back in those days. But she lived on 63rd Street, 63rd and Stewart Avenue. This would have been really just down the block from the Castle building. It's very easy to imagine that she might have gotten something over at Holmes' drugstore. And here's where it gets a bit weirder, is that though Holmes said that the press has constantly harped on me having killed Anna Betts, I've never found an instance where they did. Holmes had fairly limited access to newspapers to begin with while he was in jail, but I've never found any of them that suggested that he killed Anna Betts. He just assumed that they were accusing him of this, which, frankly, is a little bit suspicious. Hi to everybody over there that I might have missed over in the comments. Another possible one is it came out in the press that there was a guy named George H. Thomas who was murdered down in Columbus, Mississippi, allegedly by Holmes and Benjamin Pitezel working together when Pitezel was in town to buy lumber. Turns out this story came from a judge named Yehu Amaziah Orr, who was a bit famous in his own right. He was the last surviving Confederate member of the Confederate cabinet, which to me instantly says not a reliable source. I did recently get a chance to read his notebooks and diaries from around this period, and he confirmed in these diaries what went around in the press. He told the press that Mrs. Holmes, probably Murda, had come to his office along with her 5-year-old daughter, that would be their daughter Lucy, to fill out an affidavit saying that Holmes and a friend had murdered someone down in Mississippi. So there is apparently this affidavit. They couldn't find it in the archives down there. But, not a reliable source, but apparently there is something about this. He did specify it wasn't really, George H. Thomas was not the guy's name, it was Thomas Gregson. The press was wrong on that one. There's also Ned Connor had a sister named Gertrude who had been working for Holmes for a while. And she died about 6 weeks after she moved back to Iowa, or sometime after she moved back. It's sometimes portrayed as having been immediately afterwards. Now, here's the thing, is Ned always said, no. She definitely did not die because of anything to do with H.H. Holmes. There was a rumor that the two of them had had an affair. Holmes kind of claimed that the two of them had had an affair, but Ned was very insistent. No, we have a doctor's note. She died of heart disease. We can prove that Holmes never ruined her. She died pure. And really, it gets to where he protests so much that I kind of wonder if they would rather have her, rather let Holmes get away with it than let anybody know that she had actually slept with him. Now, this was something that was already been going around. It was really the first murder Holmes was accused of. After she died, a guy working with Holmes heard about this and said, "Holmes, you have killed her." To which Holmes just laughed and said, "Oh, what makes you think that?" So, yeah, this is the letter here. You also state that her brother discovered that Holmes had ruined her and gave her medicine which caused her death. It can be proven that no man had ruined her and that her death was caused by neuralgia of the heart and not by any medicine. They just protest too much. We got time for a couple more here. This is Block 37 here in Chicago, the new shopping mall, filmed on a very rainy day. Formerly the site of the Chemical Bank building. Now, this seems to have been a place where a lot of startups, as we would now call them, were operating. Holmes was pretending in the early 1890s to start a glass bending company. He even claimed he found a guy named L.W. Warner, said, "Warner, since we're using your money to start this, let's call it the Warner Glass Bending Company." And here at the Chemical Bank building, they would take meetings with investors, even though they never actually bent any glass. Later on, Holmes said that he built a glass bending oven and tested it by shoving L.W. Warner inside and killing him. L.W. Warner was alive and well and living in Newton, Iowa at the time. But elsewhere in the building, Benjamin Pitezel had an office himself where he was demonstrating a patent coal bin that he had invented. It was some kind of coal bin that you could keep in your house and not get dust all over the place. So he got involved in various swindles with Holmes. They must have met and found that they had a shared love of dishonest business practices. And when Holmes got a hold of Minnie Williams' property and fled the state to get away from insurance people, he and Holmes went down to Fort Worth where they built a second castle. Looked kind of like the one back in Chicago, only about twice the size. The diagram of the inside of it is very strange. It's built, honestly, like a place where nobody ever actually expected to do anything. The whole thing, once again, was really just an excuse to swindle people. But then, afterwards, now my theory here is that Holmes was telling Peitzel that he owed him. Peitzel had gotten involved in a big Indiana check passing scheme that made way more news than Holmes had ever made up to that point. Holmes somehow managed to get him out of the jail, and at some point must have said, "All right, you owe me now." Now, right next door to the Chemical Bank building was the Fidelity Mutual Life Insurance Policy Office. They apparently went there, bought Benjamin Peitzel a $10,000 policy. The plan was that they were going to Philadelphia to fake his death. They went to Philadelphia, rented a little apartment on Callowhill Street. But then, at some point along the line, Holmes decided that Peitzel being a drinker was just too big of a risk, and instead of faking his death, he just killed him. Had the body buried in a shallow grave. Now, he made it look as though Peitzel had been working on an invention and blown up something with his pipe and died in the explosion. If the body had been left to deteriorate long enough, he probably would have gotten away with it. But Peitzel had been talking about buying a patent for a saw invention off a guy who lived in the neighborhood, and they didn't really estimate how much an inventor will be persistent. This guy came in and found the body before it had decomposed too much. But it was buried. Eventually, the skull was disinterred. The skull was eventually given back to Mrs. Peitzel. My guess is that it was probably buried back in Gilmanton. Is that the name of the town? Yeah. But the cemetery there lost its records years and years ago. But after Peitzel died, Holmes started traveling around with Alice, Nellie, and Howard, three of his children. Alice, Nellie, and Howard. These are their school pictures from the Wentworth School down on the south side. They don't really respond to emails about this. But he also had, this is his wife, and this is his other daughter, Desi, and their son, the baby Horton, or Wharton. Depends on which source you're looking at. There's Howard and Desi. So there are a couple of other pictures of these kids that are out there someplace that have not really survived. But Holmes was traveling around with Alice, Nellie, and Howard. Meanwhile, the others were in a whole other train car. He was telling Mrs. Peitzel, "It's okay, your husband's still alive. We're just going to go meet him. Oh, we just missed him. Also, your daughters are still alive. Oh, we just missed them." But then eventually, after Holmes' arrest, Holmes said that the kids were off in Europe someplace. But then Detective Frank Geyer was put on the job and eventually started finding the bodies. Alice and Nellie had been buried in a cellar of a rental property back in Toronto, where Holmes had been renting a house. Howard was found outside of a cottage in Irvington, outside of Indianapolis. That took an awful lot of digging to find. Most of the body had been shoved up a chimney and attempted to be cremated. They also found some empty vials of cyanide nearby. He was almost certainly killed using cyanide. I believe Holmes said something of the sort to Detective Geyer later on. But the old murder house is now, of course, long gone. The most famous story, the one that Holmes put in his confession, is that he had induced the girls to get into a trunk to play hide and seek or something, then connected a gas hose to it and asphyxiated them. The gas hose was supposed to be attached right into the wall. However, the house he had been renting in Toronto didn't have gas hookups like this. So, most likely, once again, I would say it was probably a lot easier just to give them cyanide. In any case, that gets us about over the time frame. So, those are the known victims and a few of the possible victims of H.H. Holmes. Coming up in person on Saturday, happens to be my birthday, we will be doing Dark History on Taylor Street. Next Thursday for our virtual tour, just tune in and find out. You'll find out when I do. I'll post that one pretty soon. I've been working on a lot of graphics for upcoming stuff. We're trying to get Mystericon in order for the last weekend of September. So thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, and at this point we will put the Benny Goodman back on and just hang out. I have worn out my voice today. Had to do a lot of shouting this tour. Microphone wasn't working on the bus, so... Thanks, everybody. If you have any Holmes questions, do let me know. This is kind of an interesting way to do it, just focusing on the victims when we don't know that much about most of them. And of course, this leaves out a lot of the swindling victims, too. Where's poor last wife, Georgiana? Thanks, Kirk. Thank you, Heather. Am I doing whiskey and a cookie this week? I plan to. Hey, Audrey. I'd hide anybody watching out there who was on my tour. I gave everybody the name of this place, but they're kids. They don't have Facebook. All right, Leah. I'm still trying to get in touch with the boat. I don't know what's going to happen with the boat this year. It's making me a little bit nervous. Yeah, I should have stuff on the mystery item for you, I think, by the end of the month. That might be one that you can only get there, but you're going to want it. I'm going to want it. Oh, thanks, Doreen. Oh, you know, I already did something special for myself. I got a piano. Or a keyboard, anyway, but it works like a piano. Good enough for me to play, anyway. Sarah, of course, I saw the new box set. I'm already set. The rumor right now is that next Friday, tickets for the European tour are going on sale for November. And I've already ordered the vinyl version of the set. It's a 3-record set, not like the 27 CD version. But I'll get that too, I imagine. Yeah, we got you. Thanks to everybody who's continued kicking in donations all this time. Really does help me keep these things going.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang.
I can turn the Benny down a little bit here.
The popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Leah, the podcast is getting back up onto the front burner right now. So it should be coming pretty soon. Bob, yep. No, Maureen, the podcast will be available all over, though the Patreons will probably get an early version of it. Joyce, yeah, well, we've got the Mystericons coming at the end of September. Stuff for Halloween. I got to get through this first, you know? Now, Friday morning, we always do an in-person Find a Grave Friday. I had a note for who to do this year. I think I should do this year. Oh, yeah, that guy. Yes. Okay.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
Yeah, Octavio, we'll be doing Lincoln Park Zoo tours again this year. Jen, yeah, Friday, the tour, the Mystericon always kicks off with a Friday morning in-person Find a Grave Friday. We'll stick with that. Yeah, I even know who it's going to be. Probably a different cemetery than the last couple. But nearby it. Did Hawk know about Holmes? Up to a point. That's a whole subplot. He moved to Chicago right when the investigation of the castle was going. He definitely would have heard about it. Later, he was asked about it a lot. And Hawk was living right by the murder castle, too. And claimed to own the castle building at one point. All over town. I am very sleepy today, everybody. It's been a long day, but hey, I got some news. Have you ever had the pizza at Himmel's, the German restaurant on Lawrence Avenue? I just took a school group there. You know, it was like a group meal show. It was mostly like brats and schnitzel and stuff like that. But there was an adult table, and they brought us over several pizzas from their old pizza oven. And they were so good. I mean, like perfect tavern-style pizza. I was just stunned. They've got the old school pizza oven. The kind that you can't even get anymore because they're grandfathered in so they can have theirs, but you can't get them anymore because they're a fire hazard. Do you believe that? Like a fire ever caused this city any problems? Come on.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Himmel's on Lawrence. 2201 block of Lawrence. Really, really good pizza. I'm stunned. It tasted like coal fire pizza, but tavern style. It was great to be able to show these here. Like, no, this is the real Chicago pizza. Deep dish is fine, but... Good night, Audrey. Thanks for coming by. Thank you, Lori. Been a busy couple of days. It was a good school group. Very good school group. Good kids. Susan, oh yeah, greasy fingers. They brought us out this one pizza. You know, it was like cheese, pepperoni, pineapple. But they also brought out one that was a potato rosemary pizza. Also very good. Mike, yeah, I have not tried the Pizza Hut tavern style, but as long as anything that gets people to realize that there's more to Chicago pizza than just deep dish is good. It can help change the conversation here a bit. We have several kinds of pizza in Chicago. It's not just deep dish, and I think most of us are more apt to get tavern style. And I will put Chicago thin crust over anybody else's. Have a good flight, Beth. Beth, you gonna be around on Saturday? You know you got Patreon tickets. Haunted pizza restaurants, I'm sure we can find some of those. I was in a haunted theater last night. I was at the Nederlander, side of the Iroquois. I've actually done overnight ghost hunts in that place that I wasn't really supposed to talk about. It's been a long time ago now, though. I can probably talk about it now. It's been like 20 years. Yeah, who else is coming on Saturday? Sound off. And get Adam to a couple of these European Dylan shows. Fun. Been a good couple of weeks on the Patreon. I've been doing a lot of time in the microfilm room the last couple of weeks. But Debbie, if there was a ghost in the theater last night, it would have been hard to tell. There were a lot of people in the theater. Any time of day. Now, honestly, the reason I took this school group the last few days is the rumors of the European tour. I wasn't gonna take it. Oh, yeah, okay. If I do an extra 3 days, that'll help. Yeah, tickets apparently go on sale next Friday. So I'll have to figure out where I'm going. I'd like to see Edinburgh. I've never seen Edinburgh. I always hear great things about it. Thanks, Octavio. But also, so I got to do some stuff I hadn't really done before on this tour. We did fly over Chicago, which is like soaring at Epcot, but newly installed at Navy Pier, and awesome. It's a little pricey, but 100% recommend fly over Chicago. It is really cool. Makes a fella proud to be a Chicagoan by the same people who did soaring at Epcot, but now it's like much more recent technology. Very good place. Also, the Museum of Illusions today, did not enjoy. Everything in there either made me feel stupid or made me feel dizzy. Couldn't get over the headaches and the vertigo for a while. But Himmel's really good pizza. Mike asks, does Dylan ever stop touring? No, he really doesn't. You know, for a few weeks at a time. A few months at a time. I mean, that year and a half off that he had during the pandemic was his longest break in decades. I still think he sits still very well. But hey, he sold his place in Scotland. Where's he going to stay? Kristen, yes, that moment right there. The flyover is great. I got some tickets, you know. I'll be going again. And then realizing the woman on piano is what song the woman on the piano is playing right before you disappear into the fireworks. Wow. Met with the manager after, talked with him for a while. Went to see some other stuff. Nice guy. I want to see more of the UK. I want to congratulate them on their recent election. Laura, yes. It is located as a virtual experience. The same people who did Soarin' at Epcot, only all of Chicago. This may be the first time I ever recommended people go to Navy Pier. All right, Benny will be wrapping up in a second.
One portion of Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
Heather, yes, the seats move. Not as much as you think they're moving, but they move. And right outside of it, I noticed they've got Dole Whips in the food court. So who needs Disney anymore? We got our own. But all right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. I've been Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I will see some of you. Miles has now taken up residence in a box down here, in his favorite box. But say goodnight, Miles. He just glared at me. But all right. So thanks everybody for joining me. I will see most of you, I hope, tomorrow morning for Find a Grave Friday at 10 o'clock Central, right here on Mysterious Chicago's Facebook page, and Saturday morning, Dark History on Taylor Street. So all right, everybody, thank you very much for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling everybody stay safe, stay strong, and of course, if you can, stay spooky, everybody. Have a great day.